This is a tutorial probably we should have thought to do a long time ago. People are under the impression that they need tiny brushes to do tiny lines, or people are struggling to do thin lines on models of any size, regardless of what size of brushes they're using. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to show you some very simple rules you can use to follow to increase your ability to paint thin lines and avoid frustrations. And we're going to do it using big brushes. This isn't just to prove a point, but I'm going to explain to you why maybe using a bigger brush is going to be more useful than you think in trying to paint small lines. You don't need a tiny brush to paint tiny lines. Sometimes they can be helpful, especially if they're not very good brushes. But if you've got good brushes, you can get away with using maybe a 3, a 4, or even a 5 to paint really thin lines like the ones you just saw. So let's rock on. I'm going to give you some rules about dilution, testing, using a palette, what paint to use. I'm going to give you loads of stuff that will help you paint fine lines way more easily in the future. So don't worry about it. I know this is something that people find kind of stressy, but we're going to try and make it as simple as possible. If you're not subscribed, please subscribe. Please comment below if you want to see any other basics or fundamentals, and let's jump in. So what we have here is a very old and well-trafficked, but kind of conventionally small detailing brush. This is an M, it's a shorter one. And then we have a huge brush, a size 5. Here from our S series. Now the difference between these is the proportions. One is proportionally longer, the S over the M, so this one's going to wiggle around less, but the main difference is the volume. So this is going to hold as much more paint potentially as there is a size difference between them, which I don't know, you can guess that, like 1200%, loads, absolutely tons. Roughly the difference between one brush size and another is about a doubling. Each size you go up. So we have a 4 here and we have a 5. You can see there's still a significant difference in the size and volume of these. They both got good points, but every time you go up one size, you're up doubling. One of the properties of a larger brush is that they are less volatile. They are less affected by the outside environment, so they're less prone to drying, but also you can work longer from them once they're set up because they're just holding more paint. So let's work out how to put the right amount of paint of the right strength in for painting fine lines. Now this stand, using a wet palette or anything, you can use a wet palette, works fine, but we're going to talk about the dilution of your paint. So you take some paint out, careful not to scoop it too deep into the brush. If you want to paint a fine line, one thing you can consider is the strength of your paint. So you want a small amount of quite strong paint that's ready enough to leave. You don't want it super diluted. If it's stronger, it can be more diluted, but your aim is to get things to work in one go, in one line. Doing a couple of lines, it's very, very easy to do one thin one, and then on the second go, accidentally blob it and do a fat one. But already we can see from my very first attempt there, this brush is going to be capable of doing fine lines. One of the easiest ways to control whether we can do that or not is by bracing. So you can see my pinky and my ring finger bracing off my hand. That's giving me more stability. My wrists, both of them, are braced off the desk. So reducing wiggling is by far one of the most helpful things that you can do. You don't want to start with your brush flooded. So if I start my brush like this, really, really, really wet, that's obviously going to make stuff harder. You can either draw that out on a paper towel, a good one, not one that's going to, don't use toilet paper or something that's going to make it fluffy, like a good quality kitchen towel, or you can just pop it in your mouth, brush lickers for life, and make sure that you've got some of the excess off. So now I'm going to take some of our paint. It's ready at the tip of our brush to leave. And this is what we're going for. Not too dilute, ready to go. Now, the longer we pause, we're on the clock now. This tip, even with a big brush, is going to dry out. The bigger the brush, the slower that takes, but the longer I wait and pause and deliberate and procrastinate or feel worried, the more likely it is that when I come to my model, the paint that's on the very, very tip at least doesn't want to leave. So what can we do about that? The number one tip that I would give you, aside from just going faster, is to use a little interim point on the way before you get to your model. I'm going to be using my hand, unsurprisingly. So on the way to my model, I'm just going to dab at my thumb, and that's going to keep the flow coming through the brush. I can readjust it, and what I am also going to do is I'm going to assess which is the best angle to approach from. Your brush is always going to have a best angle of approach, whatever it is. Now we've set that up, we've turned the brush around until we found the best angle of approach. Find an area. Brace. There we go. Okay, so we've done that with a huge brush, But what's allowed us to do it is having the right amount of paint that's ready to leave. Now, this is the bit that I'm waiting for. I've been talking, messing around, so that tip has started drying. This is the point where people make a mistake. Okay, at this point, because I was deliberating, either I could have continued dabbing my hand, or I just need to be willing to go back and reset the brush. Now, if I take less pauses, always be willing to turn your model around to the angle that's going to allow you to do the line the easiest. Don't be lazy with your non-painting hand. That needs to be doing all the movement. Your painting hand will work best in one shape. You'll know that, one position, nice and steady. Be willing to move this around to make it the easiest for you to, especially if you're trying to draw a straight line, for you to get that line fine. Okay, now the downsides of using a larger brush and how to pick exactly the right brush size for you for this. So some of you will have a preference. Let me get my selection out. One size, and that's just going to be because, you know, you've developed an affinity for one size of brush, or you have a particular favorite at the moment in time, and it's just a brush that you got used to. Being used to the behavior of your brush is absolutely huge. So you have here a 3, a 4, and a 5. I'm going to say some stuff here which I don't think gets covered enough. I'd say maybe the ideal brush size for this, what I'm doing here, is a 3, but I prefer using a larger brush. And the reason that you'd struggle with a bigger one is maybe it's a little bit more difficult to get that mix right with the amounts of water. So let's discount the 5 for now. One reason that you would choose to go up in size is you're painting somewhere that's hot or dry, or there's air conditioning running, or there's a fan blowing and there's wind movement or anything like that. The more stuff you have in your outside environment, let's say it's the height of summer and you're in Spain and there's aircon running in the room that you're painting in, and you don't have a humidifier or anything like that, the bigger the brush, the longer you're going to have, even on the way without like dabbing or whatever. If you just went straight to your model, there's a chance that if you're using like a 0 or something, your brush will have dried out. So the drier, the hotter, and the less humid your environment, maybe you want to go up a brush size. So let's say 3 is perfect, but it's summer, maybe you should be considering a 4. This is taking out of personal preference and stuff like that as well. You can use a smaller one if you get better at not hesitating and dabbing on the way. You know, if you've got the mix just right from a wet palette or something like that. But think about your environment as well as your preferences, and then just what brush you're used to. I'm extremely used to this size 4 at the moment. I've been using it a lot. It's not a new brush, but it's got a good point, and I know exactly how to get the most out of it. So consider the brushes you're using, but also remember that a bigger brush isn't going to make it necessarily way harder to achieve these fine lines. It's about setting it up. The stronger your paint is, the easier time you're going to have. I'll quickly do some more, and I'll do it with an ivory now. Okay, so we're going to try and put a fine line under our existing fine line. This is probably going to be a little bit tricky. Let's give it a go. So my paint's too dry, or it's not diluted enough rather. It's not leaving as easily as I would like. Tiny bit more water. You can make the mix on a wet palette and then just go from it, or you can get it right. You know, the dry palette, either way, it's just preference. Now test on the thumb. Find the side that it's going to do thinnest best from. Hold breath. Brace. A little bit fatter than would have been ideal there. Turn my brush over again. That's better. There we go. The longer you mess around and hesitate, or think, which is fine, sometimes you have to think where you're going to paint next, right? The more likely it is that you dry out. Just constantly bear in mind, is my brush drying out? If so, a little bit of water, come back, reset it, test, always test so you don't get surprises on the model. You want surprises on your fingers or your palette, and then go. Finally, in case anyone is interested in the full part of the kind of painting the cracks process, We've got a white now, and even if that's the lighter, you know, I don't have white anywhere else on this model. Maybe it seems a bit extreme, but what we need is to make it look like particular parts of our cracks are sticking out in comparison to the chip that's next to them. How we're going to achieve that is by any of the peaked areas, the areas that are sticking up at the very top, so that like the peak of the mountain here, we're going to put a white highlight on. It's probably useful to show as you get lighter and lighter and your colors get closer to white, or that they're more matte, you are going to have more issues. Where's my white go? So even less time for messing around if you've got matte paints. Far too wet. Didn't test. So paper towel or thumb in this case. Reset. So you won't always go right. Gotta be realistic with your expectations with this stuff. And often the place it'll go wrong is at the very beginning, which is why you want to test on your thumb and do like a serious test. So that's what I didn't do there. But these little bits are the peaks. These lighter sections are the bits that are raised up. That's going to make our cracks look non-uniform, and it's going to help sell the fact that they're an organic thing. All right, that is it. Hopefully you found it useful. Any more questions? Any questions about brush selection or type or preference? Or you want to know anything else? Let us know and give us the best suggestion from a fundamentals tutorial below. Winner will receive an egg, a brush set, and a texture palette if they're choosing.